world of work.
The world of work.
The opportunity for men and women
to put their skills to work in satisfying careers contributes to the quality of life for all people.
The dignity of work has always been part of the American story.
Classrooms that connect learning with real work experiences
give students the opportunity to explore vibrant career fields
and define areas of interest in which they can make an impact in the real world.
In the real world.
In the real world.
You want to feel like you've made a difference. I think that's a fundamental human need.
In a working class, history provides clues for solving present-day challenges.
Math explains the mystery behind technology.
We need individuals with strong math and science skills. We need individuals that can operate in a team. And we need individuals with technical skills.
And lessons in communication.
And help us to work together to build rich and rewarding lives.
Rich and rewarding lives.
Rich and rewarding lives.
People who make things are necessary.
Students
find passion and purpose
where real lives intersect.
Where real lives intersect.
In a real working class.
In a real working class.
Working class.
Working class.
Working class.
Working class.
Healthcare consistently changes. It doesn't stop. It runs 24/7, 365 days a year, and it changes very, very frequently. What we did a year ago is not what we do now in some cases. So students who are looking into the healthcare fields absolutely have to have that curiosity and that desire for lifelong learning.
Going into this field, your goal is to be professional, to do a good job, and to make a difference. I think probably one of the more remote concerns in pursuing service-related activities is it's not about the paycheck. It's about doing something meaningful that makes an impact and isn't just about you.
The best nurses are those who have caring and compassionate personalities. The best nurses are those who care about their patients, not about making money or doing a job to get it done. They need to really care and have empathy towards their patients, to put themselves in their patients' shoes. How would they feel if they were laying there? How would they want to be treated?
It's almost cliche. You hear it so much when it comes to public safety professionals, but you have to be motivated to help people and just want to give back to the community. If you're not interested in the traditional first responder route, meaning you don't want to be a police officer, firefighter, or EMS provider, you can still go into your community and help people through emergency management.
If we all took better care of ourselves, we'd have a whole lot more happy people. And I think it's a very strong connection between the physiological part of what I do and the psychological and mental part of what I do. Because if you don't feel good, it's very hard to inspire others, it's very hard to motivate them, it's very hard to get up about what you're doing.
My earliest memories center around reading, being read to, and also being engaged with neighbors, family members, friends, and just hearing their stories about what they did, how their day went, what they were interested in, what their concerns were. And I later learned that the right word or phrase can make a difference in a person's life.
Tom Zimmerman is an associate professor of psychology with more than 30 years of classroom experience. He also has counseled military personnel and volunteered his services to assist communities in times of crisis.
Being involved with the American Red Cross and being one of the first responders to Flight 800 caused me to draw on some of my communication skills and also on what I knew about people at that point in time.
On the evening of July 17, 1996, TWA Flight 800 departed from JFK Airport en route to Paris, France. 12 minutes into the flight, an explosion occurred and all passengers on board died. The tragedy deeply affected Zimmerman's community.
The Red Cross has a network of mental health professionals that responds to helping communities and first responders primarily. So I was one of the two people who got the call. You can help people make decisions, and there were a lot of decisions to be made that night.
Of the deceased were 16 students and 5 adult chaperones from the Montoursville High School French Club.
Montoursville is a small community, right around 5,000 in population. It's a beautiful place to grow up. That's where I spent my entire life in my childhood. So it's very family oriented. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody knew somebody who was on that aircraft or knew a family member. Even though it occurred in Long Island, the loss for our community was absolutely huge.
Within 24 hours, Montoursville went from being a quiet little community to this insurgence of people who were trying to get the story and people who were trying to help. You've got two kinds of responses that people are going to have when something happens. One is, what can I do? And then the other that is more difficult to deal with is, how do I feel as this is going on? Your goal is to help individuals learn to live with it, but also to try to help the community work its way together. The tricky part in disasters is they're great levelers in the sense that for at least a brief period of time, everybody's in the same boat. And the big thing is, if you're going to be able to live with this, find some way to make it meaningful.
The best way to describe what we do in emergency preparedness is it's a team and community effort. You know, if one piece of the response fails, you know, it's measured in people's lives. My name is Jim Slaughterback. I'm the manager of emergency preparedness for UPMC Susquehanna and work in administration for Susquehanna Regional EMS.
Every year, Jim coordinates a mass casualty exercise that is designed to prepare emergency responders in the event of an emergency.
We had 37 different agencies participating. We had people coming in from all over the state for this exercise, and I would say we had between 300 to 400 people overall. We're very fortunate here in this community from all the agencies that are involved. You know, they've got corporate support to be able to do this, and it's an investment for them, you know, but it's an investment into the community for them as well. So, you know, we all live and work and have family and friends here, so we all have a vested interest that everyone's successful in this.
I firmly believe that a community's resiliency is based upon their pre-disaster level of preparedness. The better prepared and planned communities are prior to disasters impacts their resiliency after a disaster. And it's really an emergency manager's job to lead that effort. And there are no shortage of career opportunities in the emergency management field. My name's Dave Bjorkman, and I teach emergency management.
What are some of the differentiating characteristics between these things?
Before teaching emergency management, David held positions in emergency management and law enforcement, starting in the Baltimore City Police Department after September 11th.
9/11 fundamentally changed emergency management. Now we have this element of terrorism. Terrorism has been around for hundreds of years, but 9/11 thrust that into the forefront. Emergency management, homeland security, and all these different new terms that the publics are hearing are out there actively preparing for all these new types of threat. What you see is this whole interaction across local, county, state, and federal government. It's not just the government's job to take care of people. It's your local churches, your other faith-based organizations, your volunteer organizations, your community groups. We work with fire, police, EMS, 911 communications, hospitals are part of our stakeholder network, public health, transportation, utility companies, American Red Cross, but emergency management is its true own distinct discipline. What you see typically is the spokespeople describing for either the politician or the leader of those communities what's going on, what are we doing, what can we expect, and providing information to the public. But behind the scenes, emergency management professionals are actively at work, coordinating resources, networking, and collaborating with our stakeholder partners as well as our internal team members. We're in meetings, we're planning, we're doing training, we're doing disaster exercises, and being ready for that disaster, whatever that might be. If I had to pick an academic subject that helped me in my job, it would be English. One of the major skill sets you can bring to an employer is that of writing, because you write in emergency management. Plans, research, grants, those kind of things. And right now, social media is a huge, huge system that we use in emergency management. It's just yet another platform in which we can communicate information to the public. On the flip side of that, monitoring social media for rumors and other questions from the public, misinformation, is critical, because one bit of misinformation can snowball into something very, very ugly. And so social media in terms of technology and emergency management is huge. Staying on top of rumors and misinformation is critical to what we do.
My name is Tina Evans. I am the Department Head of Applied Health Studies, which is an online program that helps students with healthcare backgrounds of the associate level transition to bachelor's degrees. If you're going to work in healthcare, you have to be able to assume the role of the patient and understand what that person is going through. Healthcare is really fast-paced, but we do have those moments where you can listen to the story and even refocus the person if needed to get to the most important pieces that you're trying to gain from their story.
Can you verify your full name and birthday for me?
Listening also fosters trust, which is important in the patient and care provider relationship. You can't just look at a situation for what it really is. It's not the knee in exam room 4. It's not the shoulder in exam room 7. That's a person, and they come with a story, and they come with feelings, and they have hopes. Maybe they injure themselves, but they need to be able to lift their child. Maybe it's a cross-country runner. Maybe it's a father that wants to go hunting. Everyone has that story. So to have a compassionate care provider who really understands what that person is seeking care for beyond the basic medical need, what are they looking to get out of the situation? What are they trying to get back to? What is their goal?
Even with years of experience, it's so easy to come to the conclusion that we pretty much know people well and we understand how people work. But on a day-to-day basis in nursing, it's not too surprising to have somebody make you realize it's not exactly the way that you thought. We go in, we see a patient, we have a judgment, we might not say it out loud, it's in our mind about how they're functioning, how their family works, how they should be functioning. And then when we learn a little bit more, we realize that we were off base with that. And it's very important in nursing that we value our ability to look at the patients and the clients as individuals.
I can't tell you how many times I've caught myself thinking I was listening and I wasn't. And that's tricky in especially social services where the perception is you're supposed to have answers. But the simplest thing is you can't have an answer unless you understand the question. If you don't know something about the person's background, you may not know enough about the source of their anxiety. So little things matter.
Artist and educator Kay Healy explores themes of home, displacement, and loss in her drawn, printed, and stuffed fabric installations. She recreates objects and imagery based on the stories of people she interviews, including senior citizens, teens, children, refugees, and individuals who have been homeless or interred during war. In 2017, the gallery at Penn College featured an exhibition of her work titled Vestiges.
The power of art is that you can display it and you can bring together other people who have had some sort of similar situation or have also felt that way, and it can really bridge connections between people and make it so that it's not quite as stigmatized or as isolated. Most of these pieces have an interview that is associated with them. One of them is Joanna, and in her interview she discussed when she was 5, her family moved to a new house and her father asked her to, put all of her special things in a certain box. She packed her things in her box, and then she found out later that on his way to the new house, he'd gone on the highway and the boxes had fallen off and her objects were gone. She discusses in her interview that just being able to revisit that as an adult and think about it and process it was a healing process for her. One of the reasons I love working this way is because I'm able to access these stories and learn about history directly from the source of people describing it. A lot of people ask for my advice on how it was that I was able to create this kind of career for myself, and I know a number of other people in many different fields who had a certain dream and it was really difficult to get there. But the key thing was that they just never gave up because there were so many obstacles that were along the course, along their path. But over the years, they just kept at it. I receive, to this day, many rejections. If you truly have a certain thing that you want to do, that is, you have to persevere.
Joseph Campbell, who was a much revered writer and mythologist and cultural anthropologist, he believed that the big goal in development and in choosing a career was to find your bliss. Do what you love and love what you do. And I think that that's good advice for anybody.
People call it the knowledge era, the intellectual era. It's a combination of man and machine. It's beyond just capturing data. It's the application of technology. It's the surgeon that's using a computer to help in the diagnosis and using robotics to actually do surgery and procedures. And the smarter the machine gets, the smarter the operator gets, and the smarter the operator gets, the smarter the machine gets. And so education not only has to focus on what skills are needed, but helping people adapt to the workplace. It used to be I can go to technology or I can go to healthcare. or social services or teaching. And it's really both. I mean, every job in today's world is a technology job.
Ira Wolf is a speaker, author, and business consultant, but he started out in a healthcare career.
People always say, well, how did you go from being a dentist to a consultant on business? It was still about customer service. It was still about hiring the best people, putting a team together, branding your business. I kind of learned seeing the big picture, integrating different pieces, being a problem solver. That's what schools need to teach. They need to teach logical thinking.
Being a nurse, you need to think fast on your feet. Sometimes you only have a matter of seconds to save someone's life. My name is Jessica Bauer, and I'm the Simulation Lab Coordinator. Simulation lab is important for our nursing students because we can replicate the situations that they will encounter in the clinical setting. Even if they do something wrong, it provides a safe environment for them to learn. Today in the simulation lab, we're going to do the asthma scenario where the patient had a respiratory infection for the last 3 days, and today he woke up with worsening shortness of breath. And the students are going to try to figure out what's wrong with him. They need to interview their patient and to try to figure out what is going on. It's kind of like they're trying to solve a mystery. With SimMan, sometimes they're kind of caught a little off guard because his eyes actually blink and his chest moves, and it startles them. I mean, they sometimes take a step back and go, oh my gosh, did he just blink his eyes? If they do the complete wrong approach, SimMan can die, but it is still a learning opportunity. Students sometimes get a little depressed or sad because they say they killed SimMan, but it's all a learning experience. So even though it wasn't such a good day in here, it would have been a much different situation out in the clinical settings. That's why simulation is such a great learning tool. It enhances their learning, and right or wrong, the decisions they make in here, they learn from them. So teaching the nursing students has changed with simulation. It provides a controlled environment for the students to learn in. The students all need to get checked off on their skills before they can do it on a real person. And they are provided tons of practice time. When the students are working in the sim lab, they definitely gain confidence.
Simulation is utilized to accent clinical experiences in the community. However, there are circumstances where there is no substitute for a real patient. An example of a situation where it is going to be better to have a real patient includes a patient who has a chronic end-of-life disease process. To really feel what the family members are going through and to understand how that support system is part of that patient's care, it's imperative that they have a real patient for that. When we consider a nurse's scope of practice and code of ethics, it includes a responsibility to look at the communities that we live in and identify the needs of that community so that we can serve the greater good. For example, in one of their fundamentals courses, it's highly likely that they'll participate in a blood pressure screening, a glucose screening, or some community service event. They might do a teaching program at an adult care facility.
This is a people-focused profession. No technology can replace the caring touch of a nurse. To be a nurse, a good nurse, you have to be a people person, and you have to be able to communicate with people. So interest in the humanities and learning about how different cultures function, and that's all part of being a well-rounded person and a well-rounded nurse. I've been a nurse for over 20 years, so I worked in various settings. I worked in long-term care, I worked in a hospital setting, I worked in a prison setting, and now I'm at the educational setting.
When I graduated high school, I was fortunate to earn the honor of being the Science Student of the Year. So to me, that initially meant, well, when I go to college, I shall take biology courses. So my father would send me packets of papers that would give me many, many options in biology degree jobs. But eventually it was my mom who came back around and said, you know, you could really use those classes in nursing courses, and I think you're really well suited for that. Eventually it was that statement that turned my career path on to nursing.
We find that students who do really well in math and science do really well in the nursing courses, and they have a better understanding of the material so that when they get out into the real world, they understand how one thing impacts another within the human body, and how maybe a medication gets metabolized in the body and how that will affect other systems.
At the most basic level, math is required for all the medications that nurses give. It involves figuring out dosages, having a system of checks and balances with the pharmacist and other nurses to make sure that we're not producing more harm than good when we give out medications. In addition to that, many nursing assessments are number-based. For example, our vital signs, our temperature, our pulse, our respiration, our O2 sats, our patient's weight, their intake and output each day. Lab work is related to ranges in math and what's high and low and what those high and lows mean. It's all related to math. And if you don't have a good foundation, the house will crumble. And nursing is not something you can slip through and just kind of make it through the cracks. It really does all come together. It's essential, extremely essential, that students understand their anatomy and physiology before entertaining their nursing courses. I find myself saying, remember that anatomy and physiology. Now we're going to use it.
This is the transverse abdominis. This is the most internal muscle. So here's your external obliques. Here's your internal obliques.
My name is Justin Ingram, and I'm assistant professor of biology. I teach a lot of the anatomy and physiology classes here at the college. The most challenging thing in science is just starting out and you're bombarded with terminology. It's just term, right? Not something that you're potentially familiar with unless you speak Latin. But terms are puzzle pieces. The terms are players to a game. The terms are characters to a story. And to understand the body, to understand the world, you gotta understand those players. Once you get the terms under your belt, you can start to see how all these little individual terms or puzzle pieces or players to a game start to come together. Growing up as a kid, I always liked science, but how do you make that into a career? What do you really do? Biology is very broad, chemistry is very broad, physics is very broad. And one of the biggest highlights and the biggest and best decisions I ever made is I decided to go not just biology and chemistry, but I also added another degree called nanotechnology. It was brand new, and I wanted to add that to my resume. So then I went from biology to chemistry to then nanotechnology, then to neuroscience, and then I got an offer to go to grad school so I could become a neuroscientist. Going there to grad school then led to a professorship today where I can do research and I can do the teaching, but it all came from decisions and really taking a chance of how do I set myself apart? What can I do that's a little bit different than everybody else? Passion is something that I like to think about as my brain being a circuit, right? So there's a circuit that processes light, there's a circuit that processes sound, there's one that tells my muscles to move, and they're all individual circuits. And I want to have that circuit just fly. And if I don't have that passion, or I'm worried about something, or I have anxiety or disease or disorder that's stopping that circuit from working, that circuit doesn't work as efficiently. So if I'm doing something that I'm not passionate about, and I don't have that drive for it, and I'm concerned for whatever reason, that circuit starts to get a little bit muddier and it doesn't work like it potentially could. So now I'm not fully performing at my full potential. And you can see a student that might not be academically as strong, but they have that passion, they have that drive. They've found their niche, they know what it is. And that type of student is the student that's going to succeed. If you're not motivated, if you don't have that drive and that grit and that passion, those students just fizzle out. If you want to become a health science professional, you can't just jump into the game and play professional sports. You got to practice and play the game before you get there first, right? So biology is the study of life, that's everything. Chemistry is the study of chemistry, which is what your body's made up of, and all the chemistries and all the drugs that affect that body. Physics is the study of motion, right? Math is essential to tell how drug concentrations are going to work and how mechanics work inside of a system. You have to see it through the lens of everything, and students don't necessarily see that. They see, I want to help this person. And that's my passion, that's my drive. But in order to do that, there's a bigger backstory, and that's where all the science comes in.
What I have done in the course of my adult life has been intimately connected with interests I had as a child.
Dr. Robert McCauley is the founding director of Emory University's Center for Mind, Brain, and Culture in Atlanta. He is a professor of philosophy, psychology, religion, and anthropology, and a pioneer in the cognitive science of religion. He is the author of 4 books, including Why Religion is Natural and Science is Not. Dr. McCauley visited Penn College in 2017 as part of the Daniel J. Doyle Technology and Society Colloquia Series.
New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2016, was the 100th birthday of Florence Karnofsky. Florence Karnofsky was my 6th grade teacher. There was no teacher who had any remotely as close an influence on me as she did. And quite literally, it is the case that there are things that I learned in 6th grade that I can still explicitly remember that have had an impact on my professional life. In fact, there's social science research on this. The findings are that if a student has a single, even one great teacher, they have a bounce in their income relative to people who don't have such an experience. Florence Karnofsky introduced me to the power of ideas and their abilities to change not only your life, but the world. Science is surprisingly more fragile, I think, than most citizens realize. Science also crucially depends upon a sound system of education throughout the society. Not everyone's going to be a scientist, not everyone's going to be a technologist. We don't know who they are from the outset, and moreover, it seems to me in a democratic system it's vitally important that all of our citizens gain a solid education and become literate citizens. For most folks, science is something really that's out there quite at a distance from them, but they do understand, first and foremost, its spin-offs in 2 domains of life. One is in technologies, many of which, of course, in our own lifetimes have been these exciting new digital technologies, but also in healthcare. Those are the sort of 2 obvious places where, for most human beings, there's a certain point in their life when these consequences of science turn out to be really important. Being able to tailor treatments to individuals on the basis of knowing perhaps the particular etiology of their own cancer and knowing their genetic makeup. This is a tremendous opportunity for all of science.
We now have these machines that enable us to do science, as it were, at a whole different grain of specificity by assembling vast amounts of information. Now, of course, the problem is, once you start doing that, you have to be able to store it, you've got to be able to organize it, you've got to be able to access it, you've got to be able to interpret it, and you've got to be able to, in short, finally condense it. We still need people to have great theories, how all this stuff should be assembled and which parts amongst the data that we have are the parts that are important.
Where do you want to make a difference in a patient's life? And how do you do something that would give them a better quality of life and a better outcome?
I have Matthew and Susan for your emergency contacts.
We look at technology at Geisinger as how do we assist a care provider, a physician, a nurse, a therapist, someone works in the health plan, a nurse at the health plan that's doing population health management. How do we make their lives a little bit better by serving up information to them where they can use it for decision-making purposes? Geisinger has been known for probably about the last 7 or 8 years at least, on a national scale and internationally, because we've used data to help us refine those business processes. We do a lot of automation, and we can support the providers, the doctors, the nurses, the therapists that work with our patients to be able to close gaps in care for those patients, to do some predictive analytics and predictive medicine to help support the patient. It starts with the electronic health record because we want to have a longitudinal view of the patient, meaning if they come to us in one of our clinics, the same information is present if they come in for an inpatient procedure, or they become sick and they're in the intensive care unit, or they just come to our EDs. And we want to make sure that we have the most current information that brings that information together. We also have a health information exchange, and we share a lot of information, which helps when a patient presents for an emergency department visit, or they come into their physician's practice, and they may have had care somewhere else in the community. Medications, problems, allergies, information is always updated and shared through what's called a continuity of care document. In addition, we do a lot of analytics. Now, where we have a large data platform that blends information from all different disparate parts of our system. It takes data that's structured, unstructured data, social media data, and brings all that information together to get a better holistic view of our patients. Data for us is extremely important to our organization.
Health information is a field where you're not going to be involved in direct patient care, but we are a function in healthcare that provides the information that others use. If the patient is in the emergency room and the doctor needs to know if the patient has any known allergies before they treat them, that's an important fact. Something simple as an allergy can mean the difference in saving a patient's life. If the patient comes in from an accident and they're unconscious and no family members are with them, we're only then relying on the information that we have available. If we can rely on that information and it's readily available and it's accurate and it's good information, it definitely helps improve the quality of patient care. So health information does save lives. Otherwise, if we miss a diagnosis or a procedure, computers have made a place for themselves in virtually every field that exists, and healthcare and health information is no exception. Today, with just a few clicks and a quick search of the patient's name, they can find their past information and start viewing it right away. And sometimes in healthcare, seconds can make a difference. If someone is in critical condition, having that information available instantaneously can make a difference.
There is a law called HIPAA that protects patient privacy. But what people don't know is that it also secures the patient record. So there are very strong requirements in our industry about how we are going to protect patient data and patient information. The layered approach is important. So you cannot log onto a computer without a password and an access code. No one gets in the door without an ID badge that identifies them, and it probably has a computer code on it that unlocks the door. It's multiple layers. In the back side, we work with the information technology department to make sure that there are controls in place like a firewall and a lot of other things that they can do to protect us from outside intrusion. We also will encrypt the data. We scramble the data and we send it. So if it gets intercepted while it's being sent, then they can't do anything with that information. And then on the other side, there's a little technology key that they use to unscramble the data. It's all done in a matter of seconds, and the data, it can be trusted, it's accessible, and it's accurate. And the technology allows us to do that. A student once said to us, "I feel like I'm a detective. I read the story of that patient in their patient record, and from that, I'm looking for something specific." And so having that curiosity about finding out what's going on with the patient can be very interesting. Students need to have a background in physical sciences, so a little bit of anatomy and physiology. I like them to have a pathology background, understand disease a little bit, so when we get them into the medical coding classes, they have that understanding of what a disease process is. They need to be very accurate. There is not a lot of room for errors in our field. Having appreciation for numbers and being able to translate that into something useful. So we're not asking students to do complex calculus computations. What we're asking them to do is look at the numbers and let the numbers tell your story. And we're looking at the outcomes for a surgery or the outcomes from a particular type of chemotherapy or a medication. And health information professionals track that information. What do we do with it? At the end, your physician is going to make a decision about possibly care for a patient based on the numbers that we pulled out. The end result is for quality patient care. So even someone who's not hands-on patients, we would be looking at numbers that might indicate a trend in infection rates, and that's going to benefit the patient later.
Physician assistants are an essential part of the modern healthcare team. They're versatile healthcare providers that work across all medical specialties and in all healthcare settings. Physician assistants help to improve the access and the quality of care for everyone. As a physician assistant, we are up to date on the latest medical technologies. We can order MRIs and CAT scans. What is unique about a physician assistant, though, while we can order all the same tests as the doctor, our schedules are generally a little bit lighter than the doctor's. That allows us more time with the patient, so we can focus on those soft skills. We build rapport, and we are known for our ability to educate patients. We got to remember that we're treating a person and not just a test result or a number.
Most physician assistant programs consist of a classroom component where students learn theory and technique. The classroom work is followed by clinical rotations in the field, where students rotate through a variety of specialties.
And we have a long tradition of community involvement.
The health science students at Penn College have an incredible opportunity. Once a year, all eyes of the world are on Williamsport when the Little League World Series is held here. It's amazing what that does to our community and to the world looking at who we are here in Williamsport. All of Penn College gets involved in the Little League World Series.
Physician assistant students man the infirmary at the Little League World Series, where they treat players and coaches.
It's an incredible opportunity for them, and it's wonderful for our community. And giving back is part of what we do. It's part of our overall mission and vision for a successful entity as a college, but it's also part of what we're educating students to do when they get out into the work world. The data shows that we spend a tremendous amount of time in our workplace, doing whatever our job or our career is. If you don't find satisfaction in that, then you're going to have a hard time. If you get up every day and dread going to work, then your work product will show it, your colleagues will know it, the public you interact with will know it. No matter how good an actor you are, you cannot hide that. When you are trying to identify what brings you happiness, what can you find passion in, that's the area you need to think about when you're choosing a career. Too often people say, I want X career because it's going to give me more money, or I want Y career because it's Fridays off, or I want Z career because it's easy and fast and I can get a quick credential and get out into the work world. That will be fine for a job. That will not be fine for a career. When I talk to young people today about their career path, I go back to something I learned from my parents. You need to do each job that you have with everything that you have. Don't just do what's on your job description, because you don't know what tomorrow's job description will be. And when people see you as a go-getter, then they have a vision of what you can do. And so your job will change a lot. And don't plan it all out, because you have no clue what the next job is really going to be for you. It could be the coolest thing in the world. You just haven't thought of it. But somebody's watching you work. Somebody's watching how you work and what you do. And if you play your cards right and you work hard and you invest in the organization you're in, you believe in their mission, you can end up in the president's office.
If we're always coming to work stressed, and if we're always coming to work with a racing heart and with tense muscles, how are we going to do our best work? We're not going to produce well. We're not going to think well. That's one of the reasons why I think it's really important to integrate things like mindfulness and other stress reduction measures in the workplace so that we can be calmer and more present and more effective employees. When I was a college student myself, studying communication, I ended up having a lot of anxiety. How did I overcome my anxiety? Mindfulness was a key piece. Being fully present to the moment enhances our ability to make good decisions. It allows us to take in as much information possible about the given moment. One thing that I know I like to do to kind of reset myself, and I even lead my students in this activity too. I ask them to sit for just 30 seconds and I time it. And I say, okay, get a piece of paper and a pen. Every time any thought comes into your head, it can be anything. What am I gonna eat for lunch? Why are we doing this silly activity? Put a check mark on the piece of paper. And then at the end of the 30 seconds, see how many check marks you have. And that's, I think, one of the best ways for a beginner to come to understand the idea of what it means to be present in the moment, to be aware of the thoughts that are constantly going in and out of our heads. There's a lot of research out there regarding mindfulness in the workplace and what it can do, and it has all sorts of positive effects. It can help people retain more information. It's been shown to increase job satisfaction, job engagement, creativity, job performance even. It reduces things like emotional exhaustion and stress, even accidents in the workplace, because when you practice paying attention to being in the present moment, you tend to be more cognizant of what's going on around you. All too often, we're looking for patterns in things. Sometimes that's good, but other times that works to our disadvantage. We'll see a patient presenting what we think is a certain disease or diagnosis, but if we're not paying good attention to what's actually going on in that moment, we might be making some very big mistakes. I like to bring up the iceberg principle in my classes. Everyone knows the icebergs, you only see this little tiny bit at the top, and then there's the surface, and there's so much below the surface. I like to tell them what they see and what they think and how they interact with people on a daily basis. That's above the surface, but they really need to kind of dive into their own minds and ask themselves, what assumptions am I making about the world? How did I come to believe X, Y, and Z? And with that type of introspection, I think can help students better prepare themselves to analyze external information in a more nuanced way.
Some of the major challenges in healthcare right now have to do with cost and access and quality. Right now, we are spending over 17% of the gross domestic product in the United States on healthcare, which is really an obscene amount compared to what other countries are spending. We can't afford to continue in the path that we're on. Healthcare is well care, it's not sick care. We need to be proactive rather than reactive. We can't wait until something's wrong to seek care. By the time something's wrong, some options have already been taken away from you. Some things in healthcare are fixable and some are not. What you do in your 50s determines your 60s. What you do in your 60s determines your 70s. So each decade will prepare you for what you're doing in the following decade, and that starts in your 20s. You need to take your own health seriously. You need to take your own education seriously. Having that good foundation of transitioning from high school to college and keeping healthy habits, keeping the ability to exercise a couple times a week and eat correctly and avoid bad substances or things that we know are damaging to the body. Having that confidence to live what you're saying to patients makes all the difference in the world.
I think that if there's a single message that applies to almost anybody, there's nothing wrong with effort. Effort's good. Putting forth effort means that you were challenged. It means that you worked at a solution. It doesn't matter if it took you twice as long as you thought it would. You're better off for it.
So as the technology continues to grow in every single field, not just cell science, you need new trainings and new techniques. Continue to change your brain circuitry. Learn as many different things as you can, experience as many different things as you physically can, and find the things that you really like to do, and find those skills and those niches that really speak to you and really make you want to get up in the morning. And once you find that, you got yourself a career.
Students going into healthcare need to realize that by doing their work, they do make a difference. For every student who interacts with a patient, they've already made a difference in that one patient's life. You don't have to affect change in the whole system. Start with one patient and treat that patient well. Treat that patient with decisions that come from your education, that come from compassion. Treat the patient as if they were your family member. Treat them as if they were your mother, your grandmother. Treat them as if you'd want to be treated yourself. If you do that and you give everything you have to that one patient, you've made a huge difference in that patient's life already.